I wasn't supposed to be home that day. That still feels like the hinge moment, the point everything turned on. I had a meeting in Dallas with a client who'd flown in from New York. Canceled last minute due to family reasons, whatever that meant. So instead of spending 4 hours staring at spreadsheets in a hotel conference room, I was back in my car by noon, halfway through a drive I didn't expect to make again until the next day. No big plans in mind, just a quiet afternoon, maybe a change of clothes, a late lunch, and a head start on Monday's prep work. The thought of surprising her even crossed my mind briefly. I had half an idea to pick up something sweet from the bakery near the house. Something dumb and spontaneous like I used to do when we were dating. But I didn't stop. I just drove home, unaware that a very different kind of surprise was waiting for me. When I stepped inside, the house was off. You know how a place can feel wrong even when everything looks normal? That was the feeling. The air was still, like the whole place was holding its breath. The thermostat read the usual 72 degrees, but it felt colder. More distant. No TV noise, no clinking of dishes in the sink, no scent of her candles. Just silence. Except for the music. It was faint, too faint for her usual taste. She normally cranked her playlists, especially when she was alone. But this was something softer. Not her usual indie folk or alt-rock favorites. Something sleeker, jazzy almost, like the soundtrack of a boutique clothing store or a wine bar. I stood there for a second, confused. She didn't listen to that kind of music. At least, not around me. Babe? I called out, more habit than anything. No answer. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and started up the stairs. Each step sounded louder than usual, like the silence was amplifying everything. As I reached the top, I could tell the music was coming from our bedroom. That's when I started to feel it, that unmistakable buzz of adrenaline in my chest. Not fear exactly. Not anger. Just a shift. A warning. The door was cracked open about a foot. I approached slowly, almost holding my breath. I wasn't trying to be sneaky, I wasn't thinking at all, really. But I paused at the edge of the doorway and looked in. She was standing in front of the full-length mirror, fixing her hair. Her back was to me, but I could see her face in the reflection. She was smiling, not a wide, beaming smile, but something smaller, private. She wore a dress I didn't recognize. Black, form-fitting, minimalistic. Not flashy, but elegant. Definitely not something she wore around the house. And then I saw him. He was just a flash in the mirror, a man, tall, maybe an inch or two shorter than me, wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up like he'd made himself comfortable. He was standing close. Too close. One hand rested lightly on her waist. They weren't talking. Just standing there. Like that was normal. I didn't speak. I didn't walk in. I just stepped back slowly into the hallway, heart pounding, mind racing. My first thought wasn't even anger. It was disbelief. I backed down the stairs one step at a time, unsure what the hell I had just witnessed. I stood in the kitchen for a minute, unsure of what to do next. I wasn't sure if I should call her out, if I even wanted to. What would I say? What could I say? 5 minutes later, she came downstairs. Alone. The music had stopped. She looked surprised, genuinely surprised, to see me. You're home early, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I kept my tone neutral. Yeah, Dallas meeting got canceled last minute. Thought I'd head home and get ahead on work. She nodded, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. That's nice. There was a pause, barely a second, but loaded. I asked casually, like I hadn't just seen what I saw. Were you just upstairs with someone? Her eyes didn't flicker. Her face didn't twitch. Nothing in her voice betrayed even the smallest ripple. Oh yeah. Carter. Remember him? From college? He's in town for a real estate thing. He stopped by to talk through some investment ideas. Totally random, I know. He only had like 10 minutes. I think he's heading to the airport soon. Carter. That name rang a faint bell. I vaguely remembered her mentioning him once, maybe years ago. Some guy from her business ethics seminar. He was a real estate broker now, I think. She had brought him up in passing over wine once, joking about how he always used to come to class overdressed. Investment ideas? I repeated. Yeah, she said, leaning against the counter like this was all normal. He's been thinking about moving his firm's money into boutique rentals. I told him about that spot near Bellwood you said was undervalued. He's intrigued. We only talked for a few minutes. She was so composed. So casual. It was honestly impressive, the way she just defused the whole thing. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't stammering. If I hadn't seen what I saw, I might have believed her. Hell, part of me wanted to. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Got it. She smiled back and asked if I was hungry. Just like that. I didn't push. I didn't ask where Carter went or why her playlist suddenly sounded like a jazz lounge or why her reflection looked like she was preparing for a date, not a business meeting. I didn't even ask why she didn't mention any of this earlier in the week. I just nodded and said I could eat. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment in the mirror, trying to rewrite it, trying to convince myself that maybe I'd misread the whole thing. Maybe his hand wasn't really on her waist. Maybe I just caught the tail end of a goodbye hug. Maybe Carter was exactly who she said he was and there was no subtext, no double meaning, no secret. But the truth was, something had shifted. I could feel it. A small crack had opened in the foundation of our life and no amount of pretending could seal it shut. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. That I was just being paranoid. That people can have old friends. That hand placement can be misread in a reflection. That it wasn't worth blowing things up over a glimpse. But it didn't matter. Because deep down, I already knew. After that afternoon, I started noticing things, not all at once, not like a light switch, but gradually, like fog lifting just enough to reveal shapes you didn't realize were there before. It's strange how hindsight sharpens everything. All the little things I used to brush off suddenly took on new meaning, as if someone had handed me a new lens and said, look again. First, it was her schedule. She started leaving the house more often than usual. Errands, meetings, spontaneous catch-ups with friends I didn't recognize. I'd come home from work and find a note, went to a quick dinner with Rachel or last-minute client consult, be home late. Always vague. Always just plausible enough. But the part that gnawed at me was how she started packing small bags in the trunk of her car. Not luggage, not gym gear. More like outfit changes. I spotted them twice. One was a navy blue garment bag I didn't recognize and the other was a simple shopping tote with what looked like a change of shoes and a makeup bag. She hadn't mentioned any evening events, not to me. Then there was her phone. She'd always kept it nearby, but now it was practically glued to her hand. Locked screen, flipped face down on the table when we ate. Notifications buzzed constantly, texts, alerts, pings I couldn't place. Once or twice, I caught her smiling down at the screen before tucking it away the moment I walked into the room. Nothing dramatic. Nothing incriminating. Just off. It might have been nothing. It could have been everything. I didn't say anything at first. I tried to believe my own excuses. Maybe she was busy, stressed, maybe I was overanalyzing. That's the thing about suspicion, it doesn't walk in with a megaphone. It whispers. It seeds doubt. And once it starts growing, it's almost impossible to stop. The next clue came completely by accident. I was borrowing her car one Saturday, mine was in for a routine oil change, and she'd taken my keys by mistake. When I opened the glove box to find the registration, I found a small delivery card tucked between the manuals. It was from a florist, confirmation of an order pickup, signed, "Thank you for your business, Ms. Langston," and listing an address I didn't recognize. I asked her about it later that day, casually, over coffee, like I was just curious. She blinked, then said, "Oh yeah, that was for my boss. I picked up a bouquet for a retirement event we were hosting. He was running late." No hesitation. No cracks. She said it so cleanly I almost dropped it. But the address on the card wasn't near her office. It was across town. The kind of neighborhood where trendy cafes lined the sidewalks and boutique condos loomed above wine bars. Not exactly the corporate district. A few days later, I noticed a faint red mark on her wrist, a narrow imprint, like the kind of bangle or a tight watch might leave. I asked her about it without thinking. She pulled her sleeve down and said, "Oh, this? New bracelet. Got it from that vendor at the conference last week." I didn't remember her wearing a new bracelet that day. In fact, I didn't remember hearing much about the conference at all. Just that she'd be staying overnight in the city because the sessions ran late. I started writing things down. Not in a dramatic way, just a private note on my phone. I created a locked folder, filled it with little details, dates, names, what she told me versus what I observed. I felt crazy doing it. But I needed something solid. Something more than my gut. And the more I wrote, the more the pattern emerged. There was the time she came home wearing a different shade of lipstick than the one she left with. The day I noticed a faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine clinging to her jacket. The restaurant receipt she tossed out that didn't match the place she told me she'd gone with coworkers. And the weekends, God, the weekends. She started asking for alone time. Not in a selfish way, not overtly. She'd say things like, "I just need a day to clear my head," or "I've been feeling burnt out, I need a little space." I respected that. I gave it to her. Everyone deserves room to breathe. But the timing started to feel too deliberate. Always on Saturdays. Always for most of the day. She'd leave late morning, return after dark, usually distracted or oddly upbeat, depending on whatever version of herself she brought home that day. I tested the waters once. I asked if I could tag along jokingly when she said she was heading out to browse antique shops. She laughed it off. Said she needed solitude. Said she didn't want to drag me through shops I didn't care about. You'd be bored out of your mind, she said. Maybe I would have been. But that wasn't the point. Her demeanor shifted too. That's what finally got to me. She was distant, not in the sense of being cold, but emotionally disconnected. Like she was acting out a script, showing up physically but leaving her real thoughts somewhere else. She smiled when she needed to, kissed me goodnight, asked about my day. But her eyes never stayed locked on mine for long. Her voice rarely wavered, her laughter felt thinner. There was no warmth in it. Just noise. Once during dinner, I told a story about a coworker's awful presentation. Normally, she would have laughed, asked for more details. Instead, she barely looked up from her phone. Just said, "Wow, rough," and went back to scrolling. It hit me hard. I started rehearsing conversations in my head, imagining how I'd bring it up. How I'd say, "Hey, is there something you're not telling me?" But every time I got close, I'd hear her voice in my memory, calm and unwavering, saying, "You're imagining things," or "You always overthink." And the worst part? I started to believe that maybe I was. That maybe I was just being insecure. But insecurity doesn't explain the lies. Or the late-night drives. Or the way she started double-cleansing her face and spraying perfume right before leaving for errands. I watched her leave once, this time from the upstairs window without her knowing. She got into her car, checked her reflection in the mirror, then pulled out her phone. She sat there for 2 minutes before driving off. No music playing. Just her texting someone with that quiet, focused expression I'd once thought was reserved for me. She didn't know I was watching. And I didn't know who she was anymore. I remember the day like it's etched into my bones. A Saturday morning, sky overcast, not cold but heavy, the kind of weather where everything feels muted, like the world is holding back. I was supposed to be on my way to the dry cleaner, picking up some documents from a downtown office for a project I was helping with. Just routine stuff. But as fate would have it, traffic was lighter than usual. I got downtown 30 minutes early with nothing to do but K*LL time. I parked 2 blocks away from the office, grabbed a coffee, and wandered, not aimlessly, but not really with a purpose either. And that's when I saw her car. Parallel, parked in a side street, nestled between a white Tesla and a dusty old Subaru. Same plates. Same scuff mark on the rear bumper. It was her. I froze for a second, unsure of what to make of it. She told me she was meeting a client at a networking brunch in the Arts District, North Side, nowhere near here. I stood across the street, sipping my coffee as the wheels in my brain turned. Maybe it was a detour. Maybe her meeting got moved. Maybe she stopped by for something unrelated. And maybe I was lying to myself. I scanned the sidewalk, the storefronts, the small cafe nestled on the corner with outdoor seating and giant glass windows. A trendy little place we'd passed once, the kind of spot she used to mock for serving $7 toast with flowers on it. But that's where she was. I saw her through the window, sitting at a table for 2, angled just enough that I could clearly see her profile. She was laughing, really laughing, the kind that lifted her shoulders and tilted her head slightly back. Her hand reached across the table, touched the wrist of the man sitting across from her. He was dressed well. Not flashy. Just put together in a way that made him seem like he belonged in that kind of place. His shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows, expensive-looking watch peeking out. Mid-30s maybe. Confident posture. I could only see part of his face, but there was an ease to him, like someone comfortable being exactly where he was, with exactly who he was with. They were close. Not just physically, but emotionally. That kind of proximity doesn't come from a first-time meeting. That kind of body language, the leaning in, the easy laughter, the hand gestures, it comes from familiarity. Macy. Comfort. The language of people who've shared more than one table, more than one secret. I stood there, staring through that glass, while the warmth drained from my chest. Not anger, not even betrayal, just confirmation. Cold and quiet and exact. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. Just one. From across the street. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe to remind myself later that I hadn't imagined it. That it wasn't paranoia. That it was real. Something about that click, the sound of the shutter, made it final. I didn't confront her. Not then. I didn't march across the street or pound on the window or walk in with accusations. I just turned around and walked back to my car, hands shaking, breath shallow. My coffee went cold in the cup holder. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, wondering how long I'd known. Not just suspected, but known. Somewhere deep down. A kind of knowing that no excuse or lie could smother anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a coworker lunch or a networking brunch. This was a separate life. And she was living it in plain sight. When I got home later that day, she was already back. She greeted me at the door, hair pulled into a bun, casual hoodie and leggings, like she'd spent the morning running errands. I asked how the brunch went. "Oh, long," she said, rolling her eyes. "One of those small talk marathons. Couldn't wait to leave. Glad to be home." I nodded, pretending not to notice how she didn't offer any details. No names. No mention of the venue. Just generalities. She didn't ask about my day either. Just kissed me on the cheek and walked off into the kitchen to make tea. I went upstairs and pulled up the photo on my phone. There she was, in real-time memory, laughing over coffee with a man who wasn't me. Her hand grazing his. Her eyes lit with a spark I hadn't seen in months. Years, maybe. Later that night, she fell asleep early. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. What I felt was a strange calm, the clarity of a man who no longer needed answers. I had them now. The next day, I sat in the living room with my laptop and opened a new folder. I labeled it June Observation. Not dramatic, not even clever, just simple and clear. I dragged the photo into it. I added a few notes: time, location, context. Then I pulled out a notepad and started listing details I'd been collecting for weeks. Dates she'd claimed one thing and done another. Inconsistencies in her stories. Names that came up more than once. Phone call times that didn't match calendar entries. By the time I finished, I had filled 3 pages. This wasn't about catching her anymore. This was about preparing. I kept watching in the days that followed. The patterns only sharpened. Her stories stayed vague. Her texts were carefully phrased. Her eye contact never lasted too long. And me? I played my part. I listened. I smiled. I asked just enough questions to seem engaged, but never pushed. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted the full picture. A few nights later, she had another late client dinner. I told her to take her time. "No rush," I said. "I'll just order in." She smiled, kissed me goodbye. I waited 10 minutes. Then I drove to that same cafe. She wasn't there, but I waited. And sure enough, 25 minutes later, her car pulled into the lot of a wine bar 2 blocks down. Not the same man this time. Or maybe the same, just dressed differently. I stayed across the street, watched her meet him outside, saw them hug, linger a little too long, then disappear inside. I didn't take photos this time. I didn't need to. I had already made up my mind. It was real. It had been real for a long time. I just wasn't part of it. The first time I heard Brooke's name again, it was harmless. Just a passing mention over dinner. My wife said she had lunch with her that day. Something about catching up after months apart. I nodded, not thinking much of it. Brooke had always been around the fringes of our lives. She helped us move into this house, sent us a personalized cutting board for our anniversary, even took our holiday photo one year when we were too lazy to hire someone. They'd gone to college together. She was one of those friends who floated in and out, never too close, never completely gone. But after that dinner, her name kept coming up. Not often, but enough to notice. "Brooke says we should try that new sushi place. Brooke invited me to a wine tasting thing downtown. Brooke's starting her own business. Can you believe that?" She always said it casually, like she was proud of her friend's ambitions, like it was just another update in the stream of daily chatter. But I started paying closer attention, and it didn't take long to realize that Brooke wasn't just a footnote anymore. She was woven into nearly every unexplained moment in my wife's week. Then came the real punch. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was having coffee with an old colleague, Jeremy. We hadn't seen each other in over a year, but he'd reached out recently to talk about a consulting project. After a while, our conversation drifted into more personal territory. I mentioned that things at home were complicated, and before I could even elaborate, he gave me this look. That look you give someone when you already know something they don't. I asked him what that was about. He hesitated, took a sip of his coffee, then leaned in slightly. Look, I don't want to stir the pot, man, but I've heard things. About your wife. My stomach tightened. What kind of things? Just talk. Stuff that's been going around. Some people think you two are in an open marriage. I blinked. What? He nodded uncomfortably. I know, it sounded weird to me too, but I've heard it from more than one person. Mostly through Brooke, apparently. She's been telling people that you and your wife have some kind of arrangement. I didn't even know what to say. My mouth went dry. Jeremy raised his hands. I figured it was none of my business, so I stayed out of it. But you said things were complicated, and I thought maybe I should tell you. I thanked him mechanically and changed the subject, but the rest of the conversation was a blur. My mind was stuck on that word. Arrangement. A deliberate word. Not suspicion. Not cheating. An understanding. A mutual, planned reality. One I had never agreed to. When I got home that night, she was in the kitchen casually scrolling through her phone, wearing one of my sweatshirts and humming along to a playlist. She looked so ordinary. So normal. Like the person I thought I knew. I didn't bring it up right away. I couldn't. I needed something concrete. That night, while she showered, I went through her phone. I hated myself for it, but I'd crossed that line long ago. This wasn't about curiosity anymore. This was survival. She had changed her passcode. That alone told me something. But I guessed right on the third try her niece's birthday. What I found wasn't a smoking G***N. Not yet. But it was a trail. A long thread of messages between her and Brooke. Some were innocent, memes, work gossip, random links. But others. Brooke, honestly, you should just do it. You've already crossed the line, might as well enjoy it. My wife, I just don't want to blow everything up. Brooke, you're not. Trust me. He has no idea. He's comfortable. He won't question it. My wife, still. I feel bad sometimes. Brooke, stop. You deserve to feel alive. You've been dimmed for years. If he cared, really cared, he would have noticed. He doesn't see you anymore. You're free. Start acting like it. And then, a week later. Brooke, heard from Megan that he might be catching on. Be careful. My wife, he asked a few things, but nothing serious. Brooke, then lean in. Distract him. Be sweet. Make it harder to believe his gut. I stopped reading after that. I just sat there on the bed, the blue glow of her phone screen flickering in the dark, trying to process the new dimension of betrayal. It wasn't just her. It was them. Together. Manipulating me. Building a false narrative about our marriage. Brooke had **nized her proximity to us, her role as friend, confidant, helper, and used it to spread a version of our life I didn't consent to. A script she helped write and my wife performed with perfect, practiced ease. That's what finally broke me. Not the secrecy. Not the cheating. The rewriting. She didn't just lie to me. She created a version of our life where I was a fool with a smile, where my silence and loyalty were taken as permission. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I went downstairs and sat in the dark with a drink, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the hallway clock. I thought about every time Brooke had been in our house, how she hugged me hello, how she brought over wine and made jokes about spicing things up. How she always looked me dead in the eye when she said things like, "You two are solid." Honestly, I admire that. That was the worst part. The gall. The smug, disguised cruelty. The next morning I acted normal. Made coffee. Asked if she wanted toast. Kissed her goodbye. But I was done pretending. I started copying everything: photos, message threads, contact logs. I created backups of her iCloud files, printed select messages, even emailed myself screen grabs from a burner account. I wasn't sloppy. I wasn't angry. I was deliberate. Because from that point on, I wasn't just a husband trying to salvage something. I was a witness documenting a betrayal. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always end with the discovery. Sometimes it keeps evolving, shifting shape, digging deeper. Once I knew the truth, once I had the evidence, I thought the worst was behind me. But it wasn't. Not even close. It came to a head at an event I never would have imagined would matter. A company celebration. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was a Friday night, an off-site function hosted at a hotel conference center. One of those obligatory corporate mixers dressed up with fancy lighting, overpriced appetizers, and a DJ who didn't know when to stop playing early 2000s throwbacks. The event was in honor of the new regional partner. A big deal. People from all departments and branches flew in. Everyone was talking about it for weeks. My wife had been buzzing about it for days. New dress, new shoes, nails done, hair appointment. I played along, nodding when she asked for my opinion on earrings, pretending I cared about whether gold or silver matched better with whatever tone she kept referencing. She told me not to bother attending. It's mostly just internal leadership stuff, she said casually over breakfast. Plus, you'd be bored to death. I looked up from my coffee and gave her a small smile. You sure? She shrugged. Totally. It's not even a +1 thing. Which I knew was a lie, because I had already received my own invite. That's what made the whole thing so strange. She didn't know I'd been promoted. Not yet. 2 weeks earlier, I was quietly offered the regional director role for the same company she worked for, in a different division. My name hadn't been announced publicly, and I hadn't said a word. The timing felt too convenient, too poetic. So I waited. I started my onboarding that Monday. By Friday night, I was not only welcome at the event, I was being introduced. The moment I arrived, I stayed low profile. A black suit, no tie, a drink in hand, walking through the crowd like any other attendee. People I hadn't seen in years shook my hand. A few congratulated me early, discreetly. I smiled politely and told them to keep it under wraps until the official reveal during the second half of the evening. And then I saw her, at the center of a small crowd, laughing, glowing. She had that electric confidence I hadn't seen in a long time. Not around me, anyway. Hair done up just right, drink in one hand, phone in the other. She didn't look like someone worried about the cracks in her marriage. She looked like someone celebrating freedom. And beside her, leaning just a bit too close, was him. The same man from the cafe. The same man from the wine bar. Carter. Their body language didn't scream affair, but it whispered it. Subtle glances, little touches, proximity just shy of public suspicion. They didn't need to kiss or hold hands. People already believed the lie she'd sold them. That we were open, that I was distant, that I didn't mind. That's when I realized how far she'd gone. It wasn't about sneaking around anymore. It was about rewriting me out of the story. She saw me before the announcement. It was accidental. I was by the bar, facing the entrance, and she turned with a laugh and locked eyes with me for half a second. Her smile faltered, just slightly. She blinked. Her hand tightened around her glass. Then she turned back to her group and kept talking, pretending like nothing happened. I stood there, letting her squirm. No confrontation, no scene, just presence. The announcement came midway through the evening, right after the toast. The CEO took the stage, microphone in hand, beaming. After a quick speech and a few stories about the company's next chapter, he introduced me. Let's welcome our new regional director, someone many of you already know and trust. Heads turned. People clapped. I stepped forward, and I saw her face. I'll never forget it. Shock, panic, a frozen smile forced onto her lips. Her hand still gripping Carter's arm, as if she'd forgotten to let go. I took the mic, thanked the crowd, said a few gracious words and stepped back. That was it. No big reveal, no drama. Just enough of a moment to realign the dynamic. For the rest of the night, I walked the room with quiet authority. People approached me. Conversations changed. And she kept her distance, hovering near Carter, but suddenly smaller, less radiant. Later, near the end of the evening, she found me alone by the hallway leading to the coat check. You didn't tell me, she said, voice quiet but clipped. About the promotion. I looked at her calmly. Didn't think you'd care. She blinked. Of course I care. You told me it wasn't a +1 event, I said evenly. She crossed her arms. It wasn't. Not technically. I tilted my head slightly. That's not what I heard. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked like she wanted to say something, to take control of the conversation like she always did. But the old balance was gone. So I smiled, just a little, and walked past her. That was the moment everything shifted. From then on, I stopped reacting. I stopped chasing explanations. I stopped accepting her deflections. I stopped being the man she thought she could outmaneuver. She didn't know I'd started reclaiming everything. The accounts, the property, the passwords. I hadn't told her I met with a lawyer. I hadn't shown her the folder of evidence or the spreadsheet I kept on my desktop, hidden in plain sight. But I knew she felt it. A few days after the event, she started acting strangely at home. More attentive, more physical. She brought up old memories, suggested we take a weekend trip, just the two of us. She even cooked, something she hadn't done in months. I played along, but every smile I gave her was rehearsed. Every conversation, a script. She tried to ask about the new role subtly at first, then more directly. I gave her the basics, office location, staff count, but I didn't let her into the details. Not anymore. She noticed. Her messages to Brooke changed, too. I kept checking the backups. Brooke, are you sure he doesn't know? My wife. He hasn't said anything. But something's off. Brooke, then keep him close. You don't want him pulling away. My wife. Too late. He's already halfway gone. She was right. What she didn't know was, I was more than halfway gone. I was already preparing my exit. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just planned. Quietly. Systematically. I opened new bank accounts in my name only. Transferred key documents, birth certificates, deeds, retirement paperwork, to a lockbox at the bank. She still kissed me goodbye every morning. Unaware I was cataloging every move. I revoked her access to shared accounts and replaced her name on assets one by one. There were no fights, no outbursts, just steady unraveling. She thought I was still in the dark. But I was already living in the light. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom. So I gave her the illusion of control while building my escape. The morning I left, the sky was clear. No note, no drama. Just 3 bags, documents, essentials, clothes. I placed a folder on the counter. Signed divorce draft, financial breakdown, forwarding address. Her first text came within the hour. Then more calls, voicemails, panic. I didn't respond. She wasn't grieving me. She missed the convenience, the safety. Friends reached out, stunned. She hadn't told them anything. She hadn't expected it to end on my terms. But I'd given her what she claimed to want. Freedom. Now she had it. All of it.